Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fact Oregon's training on parent rights in special education. I just wanted to say hello to those that have joined us and let you know that we're going to wait until about 5 after 12 for folks to log in and get online. But for those of you that are here, I just want to point out a couple of things that you can look at while we're waiting for other folks to log in. We have our handouts on your dashboard. There's a little tab. If you hit that tab, a PDF should drop down. It's called Understand Your Rights booklet, and you can open up that PDF. You can download it. You can look through it at your leisure, and that's for you to have. From us, just so that you know, it doesn't follow along directly with the PowerPoint presentation that you will be seeing today, but it has all of the exact same information. Also, if you have any questions while we're waiting for other folks to log in, there is, and somebody just popped in a question. The question was, am I supposed to see you on the screen? No. Today, we will not be doing any webcams. You will just be seeing the PowerPoint. And so that, yeah, you'll just be seeing the PowerPoint today, no faces. And so I'm going to put myself on mute again. If you do have any questions, you can also in your dashboard, there's a tab that says questions. If you open that up, a text box will pop up and you can type in your questions and we will answer them just as quickly as we can. So give us just a few moments and we'll talk to you all real soon. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Fact Oregon's training, Parent Rights in Special Education. My name is Molly Williamson, and we're excited that everyone is joining us this afternoon. I'm going to be moderating the training today. So what that means is I'm going to be answering any questions as they come up, and you type them in, and be supporting our trainer in with any questions or supports that she needs. So I'm just going to go over how the webinar will work today. Today, you will only be hearing myself and our presenters speak. You will be following along with the PowerPoint that you should see on your screen. If you have questions throughout the training, in your dashboard, and if your dashboard is not up, you should see a little orange square with an arrow in it, and you can click that and a dashboard will open up on your computer screen. There should be a tab that says questions. If you click that tab, a text box should open up and you can type in any of your questions there. You can type in your questions and I can answer them right away, or our trainer will be giving opportunity to ask questions and have them answered live on the training. So if you would prefer that, you absolutely can. Also, you will also see that there is a tab called Handouts in your dashboard. If you click that, there is a PDF that is called Understand Rights Booklet. You can download that, look through it. It's yours to go over anytime you want. It does not follow along directly with the PowerPoint that we'll be going over today, but it has all of the exact same information. So it's a really great tool. I am going to go, I do have a few questions just to ask of everyone before we get started, just to kind of see who you are and who's joining us today. So my first question is, have you ever been to a FACT training before? This can either be if you've been to one in person, via webinar, or done any of our online trainings. And you can just click your screen, say yes or no. And I'll give everyone just a moment to answer that. And it looks like the majority of us, yes, have been to one of our trainings before, so welcome back. We're glad that you're joining us again. And the next question, is what role best describes you today? Many of us can fill many different roles, but who are you here as today? Are you here as a parent, foster parent, family member? Are you wearing your teacher hat today, or a professional? Are you here because you support somebody who experiences a disability? Or if you feel kind of like you don't fall into any of those categories. Give everyone just a moment. Everyone's really quick on the ball and answering questions today. I love it. And it looks like the majority of us joining today fall into that parent, family member range. And then a few of us are teachers and professionals. We're glad that you're joining us today. And the last question is, how old is the young person that you are joining us about today? Are they in that birth to 5-year-old range, kindergarten to 5th grade, 6th grade to 8th grade, freshman year in 10th grade to senior year 12th grade, or 18 and up, more on a transition age? It just kind of helps our presenter to, direct what she's presenting for us. So give a moment real quick for everyone to answer that. And it looks like we're a good range, but the majority of us are in that elementary school age. and then in that 6th to 8th grade, a few youngins and a few a little bit older ones. So we're so glad that everyone has joined us today. And with that being said, you don't have to listen to me anymore. I'm going to introduce Katelyn Shockley. She is Fact Oregon's Education and Community Director. She is just a breadth of knowledge, and we're so excited that you're joining us today, Katelyn, and that you can give us this presentation.
Thank you, Molly, and welcome everyone to the training. Before we get started, I just want to share a little bit more about myself and what brings me to FACT and this work today. Just like most of us on this webinar, I am a parent. I have 2 children, a 12-year-old daughter, Ramona, and a 6-year-old son, Ezra. And Ramona does experience a disability and receive special education. And we've been through the journey ever since she was just a few months old and entered early intervention and then transitioned into early childhood special education and is now just one day away from finishing 6th grade. So pretty exciting stuff. And what makes me passionate really about this work is just making sure that Ramona has all of the same opportunities afforded to her that come a little easier to her little brother. So we work to make sure that she has equal access, equal rights, just like her brother has. And that's what brings me to FACT. A little bit more about FACT Oregon, and it sounds like most of you have attended one of our trainings before, so this is just a refresher, but we are really a one-stop resource for you if you are raising a child with a disability here in Oregon. We can support families and professionals in understanding special education, and that runs the whole gamut of understanding early intervention, understanding behavior supports, understanding assistive technology, the transition to adulthood, just the general IEP process, and understanding parent rights and dispute resolution options like we're going to talk about today. We do that through trainings, workshops, and in-services. We like to get families together and recognize that sometimes the greatest resource a parent has in understanding their child's disability, understanding services, getting connected to the community, sometimes that's really just finding another parent who's a little bit further along in the journey. So much of what I've learned about advocacy and about my daughter has been from talking to other moms and dads. We offer person-centered planning tools, lots of information and resources, so check out our Facebook feed, our website. We've got lots of stuff out there for you, and we like to really share anything that we think might be relevant for other parents. And we also have a support line that can answer your questions. So today we'll speak more generally about parent rights and about dispute resolution options. If you find yourself in a sticky situation for your kiddo, or you're kind of at an impasse with your IEP team and you're struggling, then I highly recommend giving our support line a call where you can talk one-on-one with one of our support specialists and get your personal questions answered and get sort of a roadmap to what you might want to do next to support your student. So it's a great resource, it's free, and it's available via phone and email. So at the end of this hour together, you should be able to answer the following questions. So understanding your role as a parent on the IEP team, and if you're here as an educator, then you'll be understanding a parent's role on the IEP team and how you could maybe support that. What your key rights are as a parent. We will not go over every single one of a parent's procedural safeguards in special education, but I will highlight a few that I think are really important and really powerful. We'll discuss some of the ways to be the best advocate that you can for your child, and we'll discuss the options available to you for resolving disagreements if you find yourself in a place of disagreement with other members of your child's IEP team. So just a few refreshers as we get started, just to remember the basics of special education. So we have special education because of a federal law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And this law ensures that children with disabilities have available to them a free and appropriate public education. So not just the right to attend school, not just the right to enter a building, but the right to really receive an appropriate education that's targeted towards their unique needs and prepares them for further education employment, and independent living. So that's what's at the forefront of all of the things we're talking about here. We're talking about a free and appropriate public education that's preparing your children for life as a successful adult. And then quick reminder here that special education is really just specially designed instruction for students with disabilities. So it's not a room, it's not a place, it's not a program, it's specially designed instruction for students with disabilities. It's meeting their unique needs. And the IEP, the Individualized Education Program, is a legal document that describes your students' strengths, needs, and services, and it's developed by a team of people. So all of this should be just a refresher, but it's just good to sort of anchor us here and get us all on the same page as we move forward. So the IEP team consists of a lot of roles and responsibilities. Some of these are filled by the same person, so we might not have a team of 9 or more people. We might have a team that's a little bit smaller, but parents are always on the IEP team, and parents is used broadly, including adoptive parents, foster parents, biological parents, grandparents raising grandchildren, and anyone else who is acting in the role of a parent. Every IEP team needs to have a regular education teacher, that person who's the expert on the curriculum that other children your child's age are learning about. There's a district representative. That's someone who can authorize any funding that might be needed for a child and who's there to make sure that the process goes according to how it's supposed to go, right? So it's following all of the rules and laws that apply. There's a special education teacher on the team. That's someone who has that expertise in special education, in your child's disability, and instructional strategies and accommodations and modifications that might be needed for your student. Someone that can explain evaluation results to you. So if your child has just undergone an assistive technology evaluation or a behavior assessment, the person that can explain those evaluation results in a way that you can understand, someone that you can ask questions to and have those questions answered, needs to be at that team meeting and on that IEP team. If your child receives nursing supports or speech language pathology services or occupational therapy or other related services, then the people that represent those services need to be on the IEP team. Students are always invited and welcome and critical members of their own IEP teams, of course. Transition services, someone that's an expert in the transition to adulthood and in what those services look like, should be on IEP teams of older students. And anyone else with knowledge of your child, including someone that you bring to support you at that meeting, to take notes for you, others that can contribute to building a plan that is truly appropriate and meets your child's unique needs. Parents on this team are critical members. You are the one with the subject matter expertise on your child. So you're the expert on your child's strengths and gifts. You're the expert on what your child has been through already, their life experiences, settings that have worked for them, services that have worked for them, those that have not worked for them. And you're the person that's coming to that team meeting year after year with your child's whole life in mind. So you have a very unique perspective and a critical perspective, and in making sure that the IEP that's developed for your child is really appropriate for them and is really meeting their needs. So never underestimate the importance of your perspective and your participation on the IEP team. You're an equal member, just like anyone else. A couple of IEP team dynamics to keep in mind. Let me wait while my screen catches up here. So the IEP team, as we just reviewed, is made up of several different people and lots of different unique roles and responsibilities, some of which may be filled by the same person. But behind all of that are people with personalities that may go well together and may not. So IEP team meetings can be tricky for sure. Lots of different perspectives on what might be best for a student, lots of different life experiences, lots of different educational experiences that might be kind of impacting a person's perspective and what their opinion is on what might be the best approach. The team is comprised of shared decision making, so that means that it's not a majority rules type of decision making process. It's really an equal process where we get our answer when everyone's on the same page and we all agree, and that's how the team moves forward. That's not always how it looks, right? There are times when we're disagreeing, but an IEP is meant to be a shared decision-making, consensus-driven process where we're all working together on a plan and we all agree, and then we move forward. When we disagree, and we'll talk about that at the near the end of this training, that can get complicated, but it's not supposed to be a situation where anyone has the upper hand or anyone or majority rules or anything like that. Things must be considered that are suggested. So this includes the things that parents bring to the table. So I often have a lot of ideas for what I think would be best for Ramona's education. And when I attend IEP meetings for her, I share those ideas with the team, and whatever ideas those are need to be considered by other members of the team. So not just a really brief conversation, not just being shut down or told no, but really having a robust dialogue about whatever it is I'm bringing to the table as a parent. So things should be considered. We consider the ideas and opinions of all members of the team, and we honor the expertise of all members of the team. So just a few dynamics to keep in mind and remember as you're entering into IEP meetings, especially when they're starting to maybe not feel as good as they have in the past, or just getting a little bit more complicated or tricky if people are starting to disagree. So procedural safeguards or parent rights are afforded to parents of students with disabilities who are receiving special education. It's written into that federal law, the IDEA, and it's written into Oregon rules as well. At every meeting, parents get a copy of this booklet right here called the Procedural Safeguards Notice, or Parent Rights for Special Education. You can refuse this booklet if you choose to at an IEP meeting, but I really recommend that you accept it and you read it and you get familiar with it, because these are your procedural safeguards. This is the booklet that tells you what your rights are and what to do if you find yourself at an impasse or you find yourself having a disagreement with other members of the team. This is how you can exercise your parent rights. So this booklet covers a lot of different parent rights, and some of the key ones that we'll chat about today, and we'll dig a little deeper into some of these, is the right to consent. So as a parent, you consent to initial evaluations to see if your child is eligible for special education, and then you consent, if they are eligible, to your child receiving special education services. So that consent is yours to give and yours to revoke. Independent evaluations. So as a parent, you have the right to request and access an independent evaluation for your child if you disagree with an evaluation that the school district has done, and we will talk a little bit more about that. The right to receive information and access information about your child's education in your native language. The right to access your child's records at school, so to access old IEPs, access evaluation reports, access old prior written notices, and lots of different things. As a parent, you have the right to review your child's educational records. And you have the right to make sure that those records are protected from people who don't have the right to access them. So that confidentiality, that's covered in this booklet. Your right to participate on the IEP team, and your rights when it comes to disciplinary removals, so suspensions, expulsions, those kinds of things. What are the special processes available to students with disabilities? So there are some special rules about behaviors and suspensions and expulsions when it comes to students with disabilities, some exceptions to rules that are different for kids with disabilities than those without. So those are really important things to review if behavior is a concern for your student and if suspension is something that you're seeing happen. And your right to dispute resolution. So this booklet covers in detail, explains the different options you have if you really have a disagreement with other members of the IEP team and you're not able to resolve it by coming back to the table or having an IEP meeting. And we will talk about those options today, but definitely a booklet that you want to know and get familiar with. And in the handout that Molly mentioned that's attached to this training that you can download, all of this is explained as well. So first of all, I just want to chat about prior written notice. This is a parent right that you have. So anytime the school district is proposing an action or refusing something that you suggested or requested, or wants to change something or start something new, a service, for example, for your child, then parents have the right to receive prior written notice that really explains all of this to you. So it's information that is provided to you in writing when the district proposes or refuses actions that will affect your child's special education services. For example, perhaps there's a change in placement being proposed. So your child might be moved from one type of placement, such as a general education classroom with supports in a resource room, to a self-contained classroom. If that type of decision was proposed, then you would need to receive prior written notice about that. So you'd receive something in the mail that looks like this and explains why the action is proposed, what type of information it's based on. So it can't just be arbitrary. We can't just decide it just because. We have to have records, test results, conversations, meetings with family, whatever it might be that that is guiding this decision. The notice must list other options that were considered and why those other options were rejected, and anything else the team might have taken into consideration when they made this decision. And it's signed, and you have information here at the end as to what you can do if you have questions about this notice. Okay. So you might get one of these just before you have an IEP meeting. There might just be one that says, we propose to, provide them with a new IEP, and we considered that because their annual IEP is due, and it's based on the fact that the other IEP is about to expire. We considered not having an IEP meeting, and we rejected that because we would be out of compliance. So you might see these come in the mail for things just as simple as having your annual IEP meeting, but you should also receive them if, for example, you requested something and the district refused to provide it, or the district proposed a change and they're letting you know this way. Okay. Your native language. So if you speak a language other than English, then you have a right to have information about your child's education in the language that you normally use. So because parents play such a critical role on the IEP team, because you have such an important perspective to offer and information to offer about your child, your participation is so paramount that if you speak another language, then that language needs to be supported so that you can have the same access that a parent who speaks English as a native language has naturally, right? Consent for evaluations and services. So as a parent, you have the right to give consent to have your child evaluated to see if they're eligible for special education. And you have the right to refuse it. So you can say, I don't want my child evaluated for special education, or I disagree that they're eligible, or I don't want them to receive it anymore. You have that right. Or to revoke your consent if you've given it in the past and have changed your mind. And of course, to ask questions. So in order to participate actively as a parent, you have to understand what it is you're participating in. So you absolutely have the right to ask questions and get information and make informed decisions and informed consent when it comes to your child's evaluations and your child's services. I'm going to check in with Molly and see if anyone has typed any questions in so far.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. We had one question, and I'm just trying to get a clarification on it real quick. Oh, come on. But the question was, is prior written notice also provided prior to testing that will be performed in the school setting? I was trying to get clarification on whether or not that was for standardized testing or for testing that may be done, for evaluations or assessments to determine eligibility or some type of special education service that they have it. Yeah, so for tests and evaluations, not standardized testing, like tests to determine eligibility, was their clarifying answer.
Yes, so if it's a special education evaluation and we're going to conduct it in order to decide if your child is eligible, then yes, you should receive prior written notice before then. Or if you're just seeing if another eligibility category better suits your child than anything that's related to special education. To identifying your child's disability or providing them with special education services, there should be prior written notice. Something funny about that term, prior written notice, is that it does often come after something has happened. So it doesn't mean it always comes before. You might have had a team meeting and even agreed as a team that you're going to do these evaluations, and then you receive that prior written notice in the mail a few days later. That does happen.
Great. That was all the questions that I have right now, was just that one.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. Just got another one. Prior written notice is required for an evaluation, even if parent has signed consent? Question mark?
I believe so, yes. And it's just letting you know that it's happening. So it's not something you have to respond to. It's just your notice that this is going on, that you're having an IEP meeting, that you're having an evaluation, that we're seeing if your child is eligible, that we're changing their placement, even if that's something you participated in as a parent and made that decision together. When you have a change like that, often you'll see prior written notice.
And then the next question is, consent needs to be signed for eligibility testing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So that eligibility for special education is, requires lots of different assessments depending on what category you're looking at. Each category has its own criteria, and signed consent is what starts the timeline. So school districts have 60 school days to complete an eligibility evaluation process. And that 60 school day timeline doesn't even start. The clock isn't ticking until parents sign a consent form.
Great. That was all the questions for right now, and check back in a little bit. Katelyn, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, and independent educational evaluations. So this is something we just briefly went over when we talked about what's in your parent rights booklet, and this is one to read up on more. So parents have the right to an independent educational evaluation, or an IEE, if you disagree with an evaluation that's been done by your child's school district. So that's what triggers this right being available to you. So it's not for that initial evaluation before the school has done one. This doesn't mean that you can go on your own time with your own dollars and have an evaluation and then come back and ask for reimbursement. This is really when you're looking at, you've received a report of some kind about special education and you're disagreeing with those results. So you want a second opinion. So it's when you disagree with something that's been done. It might be an eligibility evaluation. It could be an augmentative communication assessment. It could even be a functional behavior assessment. So it doesn't have to be academic in nature. It just has to be related to your child's special education. It's when you disagree, you access another evaluator. They would be doing the same tests that the school district performed, but the person doing it would not be an employee of the school district, and it would be provided to you at public expense. So when you have that evaluation and you say, you know what, this is not making sense to me. I don't think this is accurate. This isn't getting to the heart of what my child needs, and I really just disagree with the whole thing or just with one component of an evaluation report, then you would approach your school district, make a request for a list of qualified evaluators, and that should be provided to you upon request. And the district's options really at that point are to either give you the list of people that can do the evaluation and let you go and do it and then pay for it, or to file a due process hearing request. And that does not happen very often. So I don't know that that's ever happened. I have not heard of that happening, but those are the two options available to a school district if a parent requests that independent educational evaluation. So that is a good tool if there is something that just really doesn't seem right, or you're really disagreeing with a small part or a large part of the results of an evaluation. So something to think about. Do we have questions on this? We do get a lot of phone calls about independent evaluation, so I'll pause again just to check in.
Sure, we did get one pretty quickly, and it says, what if I don't disagree but want an IEE for a second opinion?
Yep, that wouldn't be available unless you disagreed. So that's what triggers the educational evaluation. You have the right always to pursue a second opinion on your own, either through your insurance or other avenues, but to have the school district pay for it and have it be considered that independent educational evaluation, it's only when you disagree with an evaluation result.
Great, and that's all the questions that came in for that.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, this is a quick training, and I want to make sure we have enough time to really get into those dispute resolution options. We're skipping to effective advocacy now. So just as a parent, recognizing first and foremost that critical role you have on the IEP team and just how important your perspective is and your knowledge of your child's, whole life. So not just what happens between 8 and 3 for 9 months out of the year, but really who they are at home, what they can do, what they need help with, that kind of thing. So in addition to just offering that perspective, what are some ways to be the most effective advocate? So one is to keep the IEP process in mind. And if you're coming to us today having not seen our IEP training or attended a FACT IEP training, then I really encourage you to find our online IEP training module and watch that as many times as you need to get that full picture of just the power of the IEP process. So it really is incredible when you think about, when you participate actively as a parent, how much of a role you have to play during each stepping stone of the IEP process. So often we get phone calls where families, and I've been there too myself as a parent, who are not happy with their child's services or their child's placement. So things that happen really at the end of the IEP process when you're meeting as a team and developing a plan that meets your child's needs. What's important to remember is the IEP builds upon itself. It's a stepping stone type of process. So if we're disagreeing about placement as a team, or we're disagreeing about, how much speech services my child might need, then it might mean that we need to walk back, and our advocacy is really going to be in the special factors section of the IEP, in the present level section of the IEP, and certainly in the goals. So kind of working our way back down. What we have written into present levels, what we've identified as special factors, the types of goals that our student has on their IEP, those are the things that are going to drive their services and drive where those services take place. And that's all going to drive placement decisions. So it really is a stepping stone process, and we need to make sure that we're not saving all of that energy and advocacy just for the end, when maybe, we've written an IEP that's going to point us in a certain direction. So if we're not happy with where we've ended up, then there's a good chance that some of the effort, the communication, and the advocacy and the massaging of that IEP needs to happen earlier on in the process. So when you go to that next team meeting, you're really mindful about what you're sharing and how you're sort of building and laying a foundation for the services that you feel are the most appropriate. Any questions just about this basic process? Just how the IEP rolls out, step-by-step process?
Hi, sorry, yes. So we have a question. The question is, how long is an IEP meeting in itself supposed to go?
So that all depends. There's no set amount of time to have an IEP meeting, but it should be reasonable. That's sort of the big word that's used a lot in some of the areas of special education that don't have a timeline. Then we just look at what's reasonable, and what's reasonable varies a lot from kid to kid and what kinds of needs that they have, right? If you feel like you don't have time to ask questions, or you don't have time to discuss things, you just sort of are, things are just read aloud and then you zip ahead, then that's probably not enough time for an IEP meeting to really participate as a parent. When you think about what that means, to be able to share your ideas, to be able to ask questions, to be able to understand and reach consensus as a team, then that can take a lot of time. So sometimes if I see a meeting notice come that says an IEP meeting is is only 20 minutes or 30 minutes long, then it might be a good idea to respond to that notice, send an email to your case manager, call your case manager, and just say, I have a lot of questions and I feel like my kiddo has a lot of needs and it generally takes longer than 30 minutes to get through all of this. Can we go ahead and, if this time isn't going to work, maybe we find a different time where we have an hour or 2 hours planned and set aside to get through all of this in one meeting. Also keep in mind that if you only have 30 minutes for an IEP meeting and you don't finish, that you can always schedule another meeting. So you do not have to finish it all in one day, especially if you're feeling rushed. So if that's what you've agreed to and you're going to move forward with a 30-minute IEP meeting and it's not enough, then say, okay, it looks like we got to this part. I'd like to make sure we get our calendars out right now and let's go ahead and schedule this follow-up meeting because I still have a lot of questions and I'm still not quite sure about these things and I don't feel like we had enough time to discuss, goals or services or whatever it might be.
Okay, and if there are, say there was a meeting that went 9 hours, are there any, and the parent asked for a reconvenience, can we meet at another date, and that was not listened to by the team, are there any legal or educational consequences? Is there any way to follow up with that if that happens?
So if that sounds like a really long and difficult meeting, I'm sorry that you went through that. Your options when it comes to, I don't know what you would do about a meeting being too long. You certainly could say, I can't process this any further, or I'm not able to participate in this long meeting. I need to be done and we need to reconvene, and that's how I am going to participate as a parent. So that would be kind of the lens I would put on it, that you're really looking through, in order to participate as a parent and as a member of this team, I need a break. I need some time to discuss this with my partner. I need some time to prepare to come back and reconvene at another time. That would be my approach. Putting that in writing is always good. But as a parent, you do have the right to request an IEP meeting at any time. So if you got through that 9-hour meeting and that wasn't enough, then you could always request another meeting, and that needs to be respected and listened to. Of course, that same test of what's a reasonable amount of time, right, applies. So you might not have the next IEP meeting the next day or the next week. It might be a little while for everyone to get their schedules aligned, but you could always ask for another IEP meeting. And if you're really just at a place where that meeting was so long because you just could not come to consensus about one thing, you're discussing placement the whole time and we're just not seeing eye to eye and it doesn't seem like we're able to come to a consensus, at that time I would consider your dispute resolution options, like we will discuss in a few minutes, but especially mediation might be a good idea at that point, to ask for a neutral mediator to come in and help move the conversation along, because if you're talking for 9 hours and you're not making progress, then it sounds like some outside help is needed to keep the conversation productive.
Thank you, Katelyn.
Yeah.
We do have a couple more questions. The next question is, can IEP meetings happen in the summer prior to your young person starting school, especially if they are a kindergartner?
Yeah, so that depends who might be able to be there, might depend on what contracts look like for certain people, but it's something that I would ask about as proactively as you could. So before school gets out, saying I'd really like to meet, a couple weeks before school starts, you would probably have more luck, closer to the school year than in the middle of July when it's likely that teachers are not back in the building yet. But yeah, you could certainly request an IEP meeting at any time and request that one that happens, just before your child enters kindergarten, if they haven't had one already at the end of the school year.
And the next question is, does the parent have to ask for a functional behavioral assessment prior to the IEP?
Can you clarify, do you mean prior to your child having an IEP, or does that request have to be sent before the IEP meeting?
Yeah, let's see if the person types in and clarifies. I mean, how I have read it, it is prior to an IEP meeting. So they already have an IEP.
Okay,
Yes.
so no, you could certainly email a request for a functional behavior assessment before an IEP meeting just to get a head start on that process. But you can also save that request for the IEP meeting, so that's up to you. But again, sort of like any other educational assessment, you'd want to be asking for a consent form, which would then kind of start that process. They cannot perform that assessment until they've given you a consent form and you've signed it. So in that request saying, Susie's having a lot of challenging behaviors right now. I'm concerned about the amount of time she's been suspended. I really think it's time we look at a functional behavior assessment and write a behavior support plan. Could you please provide me with written consent within 10 business days? Signed, parent. That would be my approach, and you could send that in before the IEP meeting and hope to have your consent form right there at the IEP meeting waiting to sign, or you could make that request at the meeting and then maybe get that consent form a day or more later. It's up to you.
Great. The next question is, what are the requirements around signing the IEP? This is a good question.
Yeah,
What are
that's a
my
great
options
question.
if I don't agree with the IEP, but there is a no requirement to sign?
Right. So there's never a requirement to sign an IEP, but what signing it really means is just that in Oregon at least, is just that you're participating in the meeting. So signature does not equal agreement. It just means I was here today. I came to this IEP meeting and I was here and I spoke or I participated in some way. That's all. It's like a sign-in sheet, an attendance sheet kind of a thing. If you disagree with your IEP that's resulted from that IEP meeting, then you could write a note under your signature that says so. But more effective for me, what I've done if I've come to the end of an IEP meeting and just not felt good about where we landed, is I've just sent a follow-up email that just says, as I shared at this meeting, I disagree with this part of the IEP and I would like to meet again as soon as possible to discuss, this particular section um, further and come to a better final decision than we did today.
Great. And then
Yeah.
one last question before we let you go into the next part of the training is, if a parent requests an IEP meeting, does the school district have to meet or can they say no?
I've never seen a school district say no to a request for an IEP meeting before, so I've not experienced that. If that happens, I would say give us a call and we can help walk you through what you might want to do next. But if you request a meeting because something's changed or you have a concern or you want something to change on your child's IEP, then the rest of your team should comply with that and meet with you. And that might take a while. As I said before, it doesn't mean you're going to meet the next day because it's not an emergency. It's going to be within a reasonable amount of time. And so that depends on the situation. That depends on how many people's schedules need to be coordinated. If it's just to check in with your case manager, then sometimes that can happen as long as you're not going to change the IEP and you're just going to check in on how things are going. You could do that just one-on-one without the full team. So another thing to consider if that's really more what you're looking for.
Great. Thanks so much, Katelyn.
All right. Thank you. So keeping the process in mind, of course, is key, and then sharing your perspective. So keeping in mind that you can share and contribute to every single part of the IEP. So all of those sections that we just went over that are kind of that step-by-step process of getting to placement, as a member of the team, then you're participating actively during every part of the IEP development. But there is the section of the IEP called the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, when there is additional time given just to parents to really share your perspective and to share your ideas for enhancing your child's education. So this is an opportunity to really speak more broadly about your ideas and concerns as it relates to the entire IEP process and your child's education. And I would not miss this opportunity. So this is a great time as a parent to really share and really shine what your ideas are for your child. And the ways that we encourage parents to do this, and we've had this experience ourselves as parents, and I share my daughter's one-page profile at every IEP meeting, is this way here. So this is called a one-page profile, and this is a great tool to use across so many different settings, including special education. But a great time to share this document would be during that parent input section of the present level. So when you can say, you know what, I have lots of ideas for my child's education, and I also just want to start today by introducing them with their strengths and gifts. I want to share with you our vision for our daughter or our son's future, including those high expectations that you have, and then sharing what works and what doesn't work for your child. So through a one-page profile is a really friendly and positive and strengths-based way to share critical information that can help your child succeed at school, to help your child access a general education classroom, to access general education curriculum, and to avoid, challenges and behaviors that might occur if they're not getting the right support. So that those what works and what doesn't work sections are really critical, and this is a very friendly and positive and collaborative way to share that information right out the gate at the beginning of that IEP meeting. So definitely a great starting point for sharing things and getting your team, all kind of rallied behind the vision and all on the same side, because you really should be, right? This is all about your child. This is not an us versus them type of process. This is about everyone kind of coming together and saying, what can we do to make sure that this vision for the future is possible for this kiddo? So we definitely encourage you to make a one-page profile, and that's something we can help you with over our support line and through workshops and trainings that we do on creating a one-page profile. Another example of one is right here. So just different ways to share visually really rich information about your child that will help drive the kinds of services and things that are identified in your child's IEP. So this is something to hand out at that meeting and then refer back to as you're building the IEP. And then another really important tool is here, and it's called Parent Input and Concerns. And we have templates for parent input and concerns on our website, and I believe in your handout are templates and examples as well. So this is where we start again with something positive, such as strengths, but then we open up specifically around special education or the IEP, what our concerns are and what our remedies are. So this is an example where Sam is a student who's really great at using a computer at home. So maybe he's on YouTube and he's researching things on the internet at home, no problem. At school, he doesn't have access to technology, and maybe writing is a challenge, and we're seeing poor grades and behaviors and other things as a result. So as a parent, you can share what your child is really good at home, share the concern about what's maybe not happening at school, and then share what the solution or remedy might be, such as consulting with an assistive technology specialist. So all of this can be, and many of these, right? So lots of different concerns and lots of different remedies can be written into that parent input and shared during that section of the IEP. Again, you might not resolve all of those issues right then and there at that moment, but it's something that you've now announced to the rest of the team. You have in front of you as a guide and as an agenda that you can refer back to as along with the rest of the team, you're working through the IEP document. So when you get to services, you might be saying, I really think we need assistive technology services written into this IEP. And I really think we need some supports for the rest of the team. So for the teacher and for educational assistants, they might need some training on assistive technology, etc. You'd be bringing in those ideas throughout the IEP as you develop it. So resolving disagreements, we're getting close to time, so I'm going to get through this part and then we'll save the last couple minutes for questions. So when we get to those sticky situations in the IEP where we're just not seeing eye to eye, so that 9-hour meeting that a parent who's here today shared with us, and we still haven't resolved anything. When we're just not agreeing and not seeing eye to eye, the first step should always be to just schedule another IEP meeting and discuss the issues. So come back together, get ourselves organized, write that parent input, bring that one-page profile, and try to communicate as clearly as we can what the issue is, and try to come together and reach consensus, right? So we're going to try one last time at least. If we're still having a hard IEP meeting, just a couple of things to think about when we have come back together after something difficult or after that disagreement. Focusing on the results. So focusing not on past things that have happened that have bothered or offended us, but focusing really on what is our end goal here. We're looking at, a placement that we're requesting, or we really think a certain service is needed, or we really don't like one of those goals that's in the draft IEP and we don't want it to be there anymore. Whatever that is, focus on the outcome you seek. That's what's driving this meeting. That's what's driving all of this work. Stay clear and concise in your communication. So no need to write a parent input statement that's 10 pages long, because that's not really it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to confuse people, and you might lose your audience. So staying clear and concise about what you're here for and what your goals are. Listening for understanding, and that can be hard for all of us, especially when things are tense and when relationships have kind of broken down, but really trying to sit and listen to understand the perspectives of those that are sharing. Ask questions so that you understand. Document decisions that are made. Take notes at meetings so you know who said what. Try summarizing and rephrasing things that are said to you. So just as a way to make sure that you're on the same page, as a way to make sure that you understand. Taking breaks. So if we're having a really long meeting or just a particularly really hard meeting, know that it's always okay to say, I need a break, and then we can come back together as a team. If you need to just cool down or talk to someone on the phone or talk to your partner, whatever that might be, that's always okay. Bring support with you. Bring a friend, a grandparent, a neighbor, your partner, someone there that can help you and that knows what you know and knows what's important to you and can support you in sharing your own ideas. And follow up after an IEP meeting. So make sure, if you've made a big decision, that you send an email after that meeting to confirm that you're all on the same page, or just to follow up and say, this is what happened today. Thank you so much for meeting. These are the decisions I made. I look forward to, working together more, or whatever that might be. Or if there are unresolved issues, then following up as well and just making sure that you call those out and you're able to make a plan to how you're going to resolve those issues as a team. Make requests. So bring a written request, a formal request for a service or a placement change or whatever that might be, or an assessment like in this example. And know that when you make that formal request, then you should be receiving prior written notice as a response. So you should be receiving either the district has accepted the thing that you've requested or they've refused, but you've gotten that prior written notice so that they can explain to you their answer. So sometimes when families and me too as a parent, I've suggested something casually at an IEP meeting, or worse yet, suggested something casually not at an IEP meeting, just when I'm picking my kid up from school, and oh hey, wouldn't it be great if we tried using a keyboard during writing time, because I think that would really work great for Ramona. And then I don't ever hear anything about it, or I might hear, yeah, we've tried that before and it didn't work, so we're really not doing that anymore. That casual kind of answer, it doesn't always mean there are any bad intentions behind it, right? But it might just be that we haven't asked in the right way, and so we're not getting the answer that we seek. So when you do have a great idea for your child, or you do have a request to make sure to put it in writing and make it a formal request so that you get the attention that you need on that request, right? So it's not just dismissed or not just a casual conversation, but it's something that's truly considered by the rest of the team, and there's an actual response that you have to review. Any questions real quick, Molly?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions that came in, and they were kind of around the one-page profile time when you were going through that and talking about written parent input. So one of the questions is, it says, can we request language stating that our daughter needs one-on-one assistance at all times due to safety issues related to seizure activity to be on her IEP?
Sure. So you can request anything to be on their IEP that you feel is appropriate. And then it's just a matter of what are the ways to nuance that, what are the ways to increase the likelihood that, that approach works. So you could be adding that to their one-page profile as something that works for them, as having someone to observe them for safety, as having that supervision at all times to avoid injury or accidents. And then in that parent concerns, you could share that a concern you have is not being supervised or being unsafe due to seizure activity, and a remedy would be to have someone within eyesight or eye line of your child at all times. If that's what they need and that's what you think is appropriate, then that's something that you can put in that notice. And then since you've done so, it should be considered by the rest of the team, and you should have that healthy conversation and land somewhere as at a decision point about that. So if you all agree that that's appropriate, then it should be in the IEP. If you disagree that it's appropriate, then you have those other options that we're just about to talk about available to you to resolve that disagreement.
Sure. And then the next question is, can we include ways our kid needs to be challenged beyond grade level? And then what if they don't follow through and it says that they haven't as of yet?
So that would just be another thing to share that works is being challenged. And another concern you might share is that work is too easy. And if it's too easy, maybe we're seeing behaviors or other things as a result. So a solution would be that we are doing some work that's above grade level, or that we maybe have an assessment to see if your child's eligible for a talented and gifted program. So a student can certainly have a disability and receive special education and receive talented and gifted services. So that's something to consider. If it is in the IEP and it's not happening, then that would be, where we are right now in this PowerPoint is what do you do if you think your child's rights have been violated, or if you think your child is not receiving that free and appropriate public education. So you have the right to ask for mediation. If you're disagreeing with a service, if you're not coming to consensus as a team, it's an informal and optional process. You can request it as a parent. The school district could request it as well if they're feeling the same way. It's free for all parties, and it's a trained neutral mediator that facilitates this process. So it's not someone that's coming from the parents. It's not someone that's paid for or working for the school district, and it can help minimize that confrontation that happens when we're disagreeing, and then trust or relationships start to break down and be affected. The goal of a mediation agreement is to come to a solution that everyone agrees to and signs off on as this is what we're going to do now. And it's a confidential process. It is informal, and it is supposed to be there for you to help you come to a healthy decision. So when you feel like your team meetings are not being productive, when you've met for 9 hours and you're still stuck, that would be a good time to consider mediation. If you feel like you're not being heard, so if you've tried to say the same thing in lots of different ways and you still don't feel like you're understood, or you still feel like maybe you don't understand what the district is offering, then that might be a good idea to mediate. Have someone there to help facilitate some healthier communication strategies. And another time to consider it is when that communication or trust have broken down. So if no matter what someone says, you just can't listen to them anymore because you don't trust them, or you have an unhealthy relationship, then that would be a good time to bring in someone to help heal that relationship that you might be stuck with for a long time. So we really do need to be able to work with the people that are on our child's IEP team. And again, the mediators are neutral and trained, and they don't have any kind of conflict of interest on either side of the issue, okay? You can also file a complaint. So a state special education complaint, it's a written process that's sent to the Department of Education. And this would be when you feel like your child has not received either their free and appropriate public education, such as a time when maybe something is in their IEP, but you don't think it's happening, could be something. It's any violation of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or the Oregon administrative rules that are written to be consistent with that law, okay? If the district you believe has violated that law or those rules, then you can file a state complaint, and so can anyone else. So it does not have to be a parent of a student that files a state complaint. You need to be specific, and you're asking for the state to come in and investigate whether the thing that you believe happened actually happened. And you end up with a final order and findings. So findings as to whether or not the service that you say wasn't provided was or was not. And then if the service wasn't provided, if the law was violated, for example, then there would be corrective action included in that final order. So what the district needs to do, such as retraining their staff and holding a new IEP meeting and conducting a certain kind of assessment, whatever it is, based on the complaint that you filed, based on the issue that you had that had you file the complaint. So really quick, that timeline is 60 days from the day that you file the complaint with the state to the date that the Department of Education issues a final order. They tend to call parents and ask for some clarification, and they might ask you to even rewrite part of your complaint if some of it's unclear based on their conversation with you. And then they would send out a written request for response to the school district. The school district would then respond in writing to your complaint. You could have a chance to add more information, and so could the school district. The investigator from the State Department of Ed would come to meet with you and the district and gather some more information and make a final decision. And then they would issue a final order in writing that would again decide as to whether or not the complaint issues were substantiated or not. And if they were substantiated, what is the corrective action that the district needs to take to make everything better? And then another option available when we get to that, bump in the road where we're really not seeing eye to eye is requesting a due process hearing. So this is really many steps above that complaint process, which is all done in writing. This is a real hearing in front of a real judge. It's a formal process, can be initiated either by parents or by the school district. And it can be about any dispute that you might have related to your child's evaluations, related to their free and appropriate public education, related to their placement. There's something called the stay put rule in due process. So this means, for example, if you were disputing a placement change for your child, so say your child was in a self-contained classroom and the district proposed to move them into a general education classroom or vice versa, if you disagreed with that decision and you filed a request for a due process hearing, your child would get to stay where they were before the change throughout the duration of this process until a final order comes and either says that they agree with parents and the child stays, or they agree with the school district and the child needs to move to that new placement. A final order is issued, which again has those steps as to what needs to be done to enforce that final order. And there is an appeal process. So you can appeal. This is done at a court, right? It's done by a real judge. Appeals for due process hearings can go all the way up to larger courts and all the way into the U.S. Supreme Court, which does sometimes happen. This side-by-side comparison of these three options is in your handout, so you can kind of see quickly at a glance what the differences are, what the how formal they are, who can initiate it, what the timelines are, and why or when you might choose mediation over a due process hearing or a state complaint, for example. And we do get lots of questions about this over our support line. And if you're in this situation where you're really considering, pursuing one of these options and you've tried those IEP meetings and it just isn't working out and you have a serious issue that you're unable to resolve, then do give us a call and we can help explain these processes to you a little bit further as well. It all really comes down to three options for us parents if we're really disagreeing with other members of the team or we're not able to reach consensus. It can seem overwhelming, like we're completely stuck and we have no idea how to move forward from here. And I've been in that situation before, but really our three options are to accept what's been offered, whatever change has been proposed, whatever service has been proposed, to just accept it and decide, you know what, right now, this isn't the battle I want to choose. I'm going to go ahead and give this a try and see how it works. Or we can negotiate. So again, requesting another IEP meeting, trying a different approach, trying to rally the team in a different way, making sure to communicate clearly, trying those really less formal options to get together and coalesce and come together as a team and do the right thing and agree. Or we can choose our dispute resolution options. So we can choose to pursue mediation or a state complaint if we feel like our child's rights have been violated or our rights have been violated, or we can file that due process hearing request. So those are the options available to you when you feel stuck and overwhelmed. It's a simple way to look at it, but it really is what's there. And calling us is always a good idea when you're in that place, so we can kind of help you explore other options, really explore what it might look like to keep negotiating. And then if that's not appropriate, explore what it might look like to pursue those options. And we've gotten through our content now, just slightly over time, but I can stick around if there are people that want to stay on the line and have a few more questions.
We do have a question. The question is, I'm sorry, hold on. What does it mean to exhaust all other possibilities when pursuing all possibilities before going to due process? Where do we find out what all those possibilities are?
If that's something a parent's hearing from someone else at a school, then I would just ask them what that means and ask for a policy that points to that, or something in writing that says that that's necessary. In my experience, it's not necessary. So if you're you have the right as a parent to pursue those dispute resolution options if you feel they're appropriate. There is nothing you need to do before you pursue those. If you don't choose, it's your choice.
Okay. And then if you could just address school transfers. A parent, attempted to transfer their child to a language immersion school. It didn't get approved. Can you kind of discuss the difference between a placement change transfer and requesting that your student go to another school, and kind of interdistrict transfers and kind of the difference there?
Yeah, that would be a great support call for sure, but it's sort of, there's a placement change in special education, which is, the kind of setting where your child receives their services. So if a child was receiving their services in a self-contained special education classroom and a parent wanted to move to a school that didn't have one of those, then that could be a special education issue where, we couldn't implement your child's IEP in this new setting because this setting doesn't have the type of classroom we've decided as a team that your child needs. That could be an issue. If it's not a placement change and your child is in a regular classroom in one school and you would like to move them to a regular classroom to another school, then that really shouldn't be a special education process. It should just be the same process that you would go through for any other student in that school district. And if your child's disability seemed to be a barrier, then I would be, maybe communicating in writing, asking questions about why that is, and just making your case for why the services that are in their IEP can continue to be implemented in that different setting, in that new school.
Great. Thank you, Katelyn. Yeah, and definitely call into our support line because we can kind of dive in a little bit more deeply with them. We do have another question. If there is a time, you can talk about the difference between district policy and the law and what to do when they seem to conflict.
Okay, so they shouldn't conflict. But if they do, so it's sort of just like federal laws and state laws. There's the federal law is the big one, right? And state laws need to be consistent with the federal laws. They can add extra stuff, but they can't take away provisions of a federal law, right? And then local laws need to be consistent with state laws, and then our rules and policies and guidelines all need to be consistent with those state laws. So, and those local laws. So it sort of trickles all down, but ultimately it all needs to be consistent with IDEA, that big federal law, right? If it seems to be inconsistent somehow, then I would be asking for clarification. It doesn't hurt to point out, hey, it's my understanding that state law says this, and I'm confused as to how this particular policy is consistent with state law. Can you please explain that to me? So that's always okay to ask those questions and point that out. If you're not satisfied with that answer, then you still have those dispute resolution options available to you.
Great. Well, I think we've answered all of the questions. We don't have any more that have come in. Katelyn, I just want to thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It's always so great to hear you give trainings, and you just have so much great information, and parents are so lucky to hear you and you know, get and gain knowledge from you. And thank you to everyone that has joined us today. Again, the phone number is up on the screen and the email address. Call into our support specialists if you have more questions or want more specific information. We're always here to help parents in any way that we can.
Thank you so much. And please fill out the survey that'll pop up at the end of the training. And yeah, do give us a call if you have additional questions. I know this is just, this isn't enough time to answer everyone's questions and get in the weeds about everything. So please make sure to give us a call. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. And like Katelyn said, please take a couple minutes just to fill out that survey that's going to pop up as you log off. And it will also come in an email tomorrow if you don't have time to do it right now. Thanks for that reminder, Katelyn. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.